Sure. All right. Well, welcome everybody to my lecture recital. The topic is Extended Keyboard Techniques and Compositional Philosophy, a conversation with Emma Lou Diemer. You might be wondering who Emma Lou Diemer is. She's a contemporary composer who is actually still living. And I was first introduced to her music because I was suggested to play the Toccata for piano, which is a piece of hers that has extended techniques. And after learning this piece, I got really interested in her music and found that she had a lot of other interesting pieces. And then I found out she was still living, and I had to go and interview her. So this was the inspiration for my lecture recital, and I'll be showing a lot of video clips from our interview. So that will make up a lot of my presentation today. So there's a picture of Emma Lou Diemer in Santa Barbara, her town where she lives now. She was born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1927. She's a very prolific composer. She's written for many different genres and mediums. She is, her instrument is piano and also organ. And she's been a teacher. She taught at the University of California, Santa Barbara. That's how she ended up there. And she also taught composition at the University of Maryland and has taught piano privately at different times in her life. So before I began my project and my research, it was good to look and see what had been written about her already, because I didn't want to repeat myself. So I found that most of the dissertations that had been written about her were from the 80s. Some of them did include her piano music, but they won't include all of the pieces that I will be talking about today, because mine is through today. So, and some of them are very specific, focused on only one piece or a couple pieces. And one of the dissertations was a bunch of 20th century composers and their works. So when Diemer grew up in a musical family, all her brothers and sisters played instruments, and her mother was a pianist and taught her initially. She began by picking out pieces at the piano when she was 4 or 5, pieces that she'd heard. And she began taking piano lessons because her mother realized she was gifted in music. And then she decided to become a composer at the very early age of 12 or 13. Her earliest teacher was Mabel Payton, and this was a friend of her mother's, who was a student of Leschetizky, who was a student of Chopin. And she taught Diemer by rote, which is very important because she got her into improvising, and you'll see in some of the videos that this was important in her compositional method. In her teens, she changed to another teacher that was the director of the Kansas City Conservatory, Victor Lubinsky. And her bachelor's and master's degrees were both from Yale, studying with William Gant. Her doctorate was from Eastman, and she studied with Bernard Rogers and Howard Hansen. And Hansen they're both composers. Hansen is a composer, conductor, theorist, and he's written textbooks on harmony, or a textbook. So I've told you a little bit about her early life, and I will let her tell you in her own words from our interview.
Could you just tell me what was your musical background like when you were growing up? Like, what kind of lessons did you take, and where did you start?
I started, we had piano. We had piano in the house, which you really have to have if you're going to be a composer.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to. You can have a guitar or anything, actually.
That's true.
But a piano really helped. So yeah, we had a piano, and everybody in my family was musical.
Oh,
And my brothers and my sister all played instruments, and my mother played the piano, and my grandmother did. Not real heavy classical things, but more lighter music, like popular music and church music.
and did you take lessons from?
Yeah, I started. When I was maybe 4 or 5, I would sit down and pick out things. So my mother knew I had a musical ear.
Yeah.
And so she taught me first, and then she got a wonderful piano teacher that was a friend of hers. And she came to the house and gave me lessons.
And this was in Kansas.
Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Yeah. And then when we moved to Warrensburg, when I was about 9, I started studying there, but the teacher was not as understanding of my temper. I had actually learned to read music.
Okay.
I didn't until I was about 9 or so.
Oh, okay.
And so this teacher was kind of appalled that I didn't read music. So I really got on the phone and called Mrs. Payton, my original teacher in Kansas City, and had her come on the bus every week, every 2 weeks to give me lessons. And so I, again, started playing. And I would write little pieces about,
When did you start?
about 6 or 7, I think, and she would write them down.
Your teacher.
Yeah, my teacher.
Did you just get into that on your own, composing, or?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, everybody told me to. I just would sit down and pick out things. First, things I'd heard, and then my own music. My own music.
Do you think that not knowing how to read music helped you to get into composing ultimately?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Improvising a lot.
Yeah, improvising, exactly. Yeah, and it was good to read music too, eventually.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's a good point, that I think it was important, maybe.
The volume okay for everybody? All here? So as for her career, as I said, she's taught piano privately. That hasn't been a big part. She did that for a little while after she graduated. After her doctoral program at Eastman, she became a composer in residence at the junior and senior high schools in Arlington, Virginia. And this was through a Ford Foundation grant, or Ford Foundation project that she found out about from Howard Hanson, her composition teacher, and just thought it would be really interesting. And it turned out to be something that was really important in the development of her compositional style. She grew to love composing for choral groups, and that's a big part of her output as well. She taught composition for a little while at the University of Maryland, following her position in Arlington. And her most steady position was at UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara, which she started in 1971 and stayed there for 20 years. And she's retired from that now. And she continues now to play the organ at her church, and she's very active concertizing, especially for her age, and is still composing actively. So as I mentioned, Mabel Payton was her first teacher, and I asked her to tell me a little bit about what each teacher has done for her in her education. So she worked on the basics, hand position, relaxation, curving the fingers, and she taught Diemer by rote, as I said, and not knowing how to read music did help her to become a composer because she was improvising so much and got into improvising her own pieces, and she's glad that she didn't learn how to read music until she was 9. William Gant from Yale was one of the inspirations from him was expression and finding the soul of the music. And then Howard Hanson, she said, was very interested in harmony. He did exercises, he had the students do exercises where they had to start in one key and immediately change to another key and another key without modulating. And this is something she really enjoyed, and she had already been doing that in her compositions, but she's done it even more since then. And we did discuss composers as well, naturally. And Prokofiev was one that she mentioned a lot for his rich style and idiomatic piano writing, and also the changing keys without modulation. She really talked about that a lot. And the same for Shostakovich. And I should mention that she also considers herself a neoclassical composer. So she identifies, especially with Prokofiev. and then Bartok for his rhythm in his compositions. And then we talked about the minimalist composers, how she's been influenced by them in a positive way, and also sometimes like going too far in the minimalist direction. So she talked about sometimes composers influencing her to want to put things into her music and sometimes reacting against certain things. We did talk about jazz composers because, as you'll see, her music has kind of a jazz, it has jazz harmonies and jazz rhythms sometimes. So she said she especially admires Dave Brubeck for his use of meter. And then George Gershwin and Cole Porter. We had a kind of a lengthy discussion on popular music and how she thinks that the popular music of today is really doesn't have staying power, and it's written kind of for a quick fix, like to just make money. And how composers like Gershwin and Porter and in that era, the music has been more timeless and it's stood the test of time and still being paid attention to. So electronic music is something that's really important in her development as well. She became especially interested in it during her position at UCSB during the 70s. She became especially interested in synthesizers when they went to keyboard synthesizers, because then it was more like the piano, and it was more exciting to her rather than, she said, before you would just plug in pins into a box, and it was kind of not as exciting for her to experiment with. She has used synthesizers and electronic sounds in her compositions, and she was even inspired to use the sounds in her piano music and other types of non-electronic music. So you'll see some of the techniques that I'll show you with playing on the strings, and the piano extended techniques are meant to imitate electronic sounds sometimes. And the toccata for piano, which I'll be playing for you, is her first piece actually that she experimented with extended techniques. And I should explain, extended techniques would be any non-traditional way of playing the instrument. Like not playing on the keys, but maybe playing on the strings, or creating different effects by holding down keys and making it so the other notes will echo and you'll hear the overtones. So it could be any instrument, but in the piano, playing on the insides. So we did talk a lot about her compositional process, because I was curious about that. When she goes to write a composition, she says sometimes it'll be for a student or for a faculty member or a commission, so she considers the talents and the skill level of this person and tailors it to them. And then with the improvising, her process has been for a very long time to improvise at the piano and then to write it down, and she's even handwritten a lot of compositions. And then we also talked about the advent of computer programs for composition, and this, she said, has changed the game a lot because she's composing at the computer because it's more, it's faster, but at the same time it's not as interesting of a process because she's not improvising at the keyboard. And so she said in some ways it's been not positive, but in some ways computer programs do aid. And I just said that. So, and then the other thing she mentioned was that it will automatically give you a time signature, and it's hard to kind of break out of that and change that. So you tend to just stay in the given time signature. So I'll let her tell you a bit about that.
I was going to ask you about a lot of, well, in all the pieces I've been playing, you don't use key signatures most of the time. Is that right? Key signatures?
No key
And
signatures, no.
Do you never use any, or?
Oh yeah, I have.
You have.
But it's one thing, I've been using computer now for some time, computer notation program.
Like finale.
Yeah, and that is in some ways not good, because at the time, I mean, this piece is from, what, 79? until the middle. It's very interesting now with Steve Jobs just having died, because he was the one that, of course, developed the Macintosh. And I always used Macintosh from the middle 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then particularly when notation programs came in. I've used others before that, but Finale, of course, came in a little bit later too. And when Finale came in, and we used these notation programs that give you 4/4 time,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and your tendency is just to stay in a 4/4 time. And accommodate yourself to the inadequacy, really, of the notation program.
Right.
Whereas a piece like Toccata is much freer. You know, there was,
And that was all handwritten, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So, with the computer programs now, do you usually improvise the piano and then go to the
Yeah,
computer,
if I do, it's better. If I
Yeah.
do some improv, yeah.
or do you have a keyboard that notates?
I can do that, yeah.
So, but it still has problems with the
Yeah, but some things like, yeah, well, some of the chamber music that I've written recently have been computer written
Okay. Yeah.
because it goes faster, actually. When you sit down at the piano, you improvise, don't you?
I do, I try to.
Yeah.
I wish I were as comfortable with it as you seem to be. Yeah.
Well, when you improvise, you tend to just go on and improvise. And
not really think about what you've already done.
yeah, or you forget. I mean, you can record an improvisation. In fact, you can do that with a computer.
Right.
And have it printed out, which is very interesting.
Oh, that's useful.
Yeah, and then you have to go back and edit it. But sometimes, sometimes you'll improvise a piece that is just really good, but it's gone unless you've recorded it.
Okay, so Toccata for piano is the first piece I'd like to talk about under solo piano works. It was written in 1979 for a student senior recital at UCSB, and the student's name was Nozomi Takahashi. She talked about how her student she was very short like she was, so she considered that when she was writing, and that she could reach she didn't use too many big octaves or anything. So the inspiration, she said, was a feeling of joy and happiness, which she said was very helpful to have a definite feeling when you start to write something. And again, this was the first time that she used any extended techniques, and these include string dampening, string glissandos, padding the strings, and the left arm silent cluster, which I'll show you what that is in a minute. And she talked about how she didn't want her techniques to be too complicated, like she'd use some of the contemporary composers that use them. She just wanted it to be more general, like not dampening maybe one note or two notes or something. She wanted it to be more of a general sense. And again, it's written at the piano and completely handwritten, which is really neat when you're playing the piece because it kind of shortens the distance between the composer and the person who's performing. So here are some examples of techniques that are used in the toccata. I'll show you what the cluster is. So what you do is hold down silently here, and then you listen for the echoing overtones in the piano. You can hear it. And she said that was one of the most important things to her in this piece as far as interpretation, because that was a big part of my interview with her too. I was asking about interpretations. And she said some people just play through it really fast and they don't listen, and so that's really the only complaint that she has. And then there's an example of the string glissandos and the string padding. And I will be playing this piece in its entirety, so you'll see all of that. So the Fantasy for piano, which I have not performed yet, it was written in 1993 for pianist Karen Scoville. She's asked to write a 13 to 15 minute romantic piece. And it's especially unique because of its use of serialism. She actually has a recurring tone row and a rhythmic series that she uses in a black and white key passage, which is just one hand is playing black keys, one hand is playing white keys. And this is the actual rhythmic series, and it's referring to durations. So you can see that here's 3, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, and so on. And this is also recurring during the piece. Piano Sonata number 3, I have performed, and the first movement, it was written in 2 stages. The first movement was written in 1996, and it's a romantic style, and it's technically challenging. It's kind of a perpetual motion all the time. The second and third movements, Interlude and Tango Fantastique, these were written in mid-1999 after a trip to Argentina, so the last movement especially has tango influences, and you can hear it in, she uses the dissonances that you would hear in Piazzolla's music, you know, like the jabs, and I'll show you what that sounds like. And this was commissioned by Los Angeles pianist and pedagogue Carol Lancaster, and this was, just as a side note, this was an interesting situation for her because the person who asked for her to write it didn't end up liking it. And she had written the first movement, and she said, I don't really like it, and then she's like, well, maybe I'll wait a while and I'll write her the other 2, and she didn't like those either. So, so she said that was unique for her. So I will be playing the first and the second movements later on, so I'll just give you a taste of the tango movement. this is an example. It's much better if you're not playing with the music because you just have to redo it. So that's an example of what she does with the extended techniques. So another part of my visit with her was that I wanted to play some of the music that I worked on so I could kind of get a mini lesson. So I'm not going to play the whole thing because that was like a very long time, but I'll show you a little bit of what she had to say about toccata. So that would be the string dampening. And that's the string padding and the glissandos.
Great. That's good, yeah. It sounds really nice. That's where I would play if I wrote this now.
Really?
Yeah, and it's good to be right here because you could hear in the middle section.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really well. Yeah, well, you play it very well because you put a lot of, rhythm into it, and then you've got a lot of strength, which helps, yeah.
Was there anything that you would do differently, or?
No, there was one that could have echoed more, but most of it you really echoed very well.
In that middle section?
Yeah. Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum.
Yeah, we have a little bit more on that.
B flat, E. Yeah. That particular first one seems to echo nicely when you when you listen.
Right.
Some people have played it and they don't wait at all, and that's not the idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that one recording on YouTube.
Yeah.
It just goes through it like really
Yeah,
fast.
just so but I suppose on YouTube it would not come through, you know.
Right, maybe not.
And probably people listening would think he's forgotten.
Right.
Also, your warm-up was nice, Paul. What were you doing?
Thanks.
Concentrating?
Just doing contour motion and arpeggio as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the next portion, I'd like to talk a little bit about her intermediate pieces. This was kind of unexpected, but we were talking about intermediate piano repertoire, and I hadn't planned to really ask her about it, but she was talking about how she really doesn't like it when beginning piano pieces or intermediate pieces are limited to only a couple of octaves, or they don't get to explore the upper register and the lower register, or fixed hand positions, which are helpful to a certain extent when you're a beginning student, but it gets to be kind of tiresome. So we talked about a few sets of pieces that she's written for intermediate students. Sound Pictures, it was written in 1971. It's 10 short pieces, and they have descriptive titles. They're such as clusters and dots, incline and plateau, strata, infinity, and you can really kind of imagine what these sound like by just looking at the titles, and you'll see what I mean. They use adventurous meters and harmony compared to other intermediate rep. And I will show you clusters and dots. So you can see the clusters in the right hand and the dots in the left hand pretty clearly. She also, so young kids definitely like to play things like clusters, and she also writes in glissandos and pedaling, like holding the pedal down. All the kids love holding the pedal. When can I use the pedal? So Space Suite is the next one I'd like to talk about, and this was probably the most adventurous one as far as using extended techniques, which she did use some in this one. And it was commissioned by Clavier magazine, and dates from 1988. And this was kind of interesting. It was not really well received at the time because she got notes from teachers saying like, "This is harmful to play on the strings. It's not a good idea." So, but she talked about how the idea is just to have clean hands, and you're not going to be like have, germy, dirty hands and touching the strings. So, at least that's the idea. And the techniques used are sweeping the fingertips or the fingernails over the strings, plucking the strings, the same kind of thing that depressing the keys, knocking on the piano. Some of the titles are Billions of Stars, Space People Dancing, Space Monkey. So you can imagine your students would like that. So just to show you, those are what some of the techniques look like. You'd be holding down that's kind of specific, holding down from C to A to have it echo, and then the string glissandos, and then this would be tapping your fingernails on the strings and going up and down. So I'm not going to show you something from these two pieces, but I have another one that is called The Surface of the Moon. And I actually need to take off the stand so I can get in there. Actually, sorry. final set of pieces that I'd like to discuss. This is the most recent one that she's written for intermediate students. It's written for the FJH series in 2004. And she kind of combines, this is not as adventurous as the Space Suite, but it does have some extended techniques and also wider intervals. It also has appealing techniques to children, such as hand crossing and pedaling. So, for example, she uses clapping, which are the X's, and black is the color, and that's played entirely on the black keys, and then hand crossing and hand over hand. So this is black is the color. So I thought a lot about, and we talked about the benefits of introducing students to contemporary repertoire, because the tendency of a lot of teachers is just to stick with what is known already. So this can help students to be more open to all styles of music, because even when I've played the toccata or talked to people about playing the toccata and what it involves, like even college students are like, oh, why do you want to do that? You know? So it opens the minds a little bit, and it allows them to experiment with sounds, different sounds on the piano, because all the kids, want to play the strings and want to play different octaves. It encourages curiosity and creativity, and doesn't limit them to the fixed hand position pieces, which the experience I've had is some of my students will, they'll have a few of these fixed position pieces, and then they'll have something where they have to figure out the fingering, and they're like, what position is it in? Like, no, there isn't always a fixed position, so. Something interesting that I asked her was about the reception of her works, because she had been talking about the teachers that wrote to her about those pieces in clavier. And it's always fascinating to hear what people have to say sometimes about contemporary music. So listen to her talk about that.
When I played that for music club there at the Indy, I had a big Indy.
Yeah.
And some woman said, oh, she wasn't sure about it. People react very strangely sometimes.
Yeah.
If it's a little bit too, what they perceive as being a little too violent, I guess it offends them. The Mozart lover.
I was wondering what the most interesting reaction you've gotten to one of your pieces has been, because we were talking about some people were, when you played your sonata,
Oh yeah, all kinds, and it seems like whenever I would have something done, like an orchestra piece, in the slow section, people are coughing,
Oh, yeah.
There's something about, maybe the music, it makes them nervous, maybe, if it's not in G major, you know, or
Right.
much high, you know. And maybe so then when maybe they've been coughing all the time, I don't know. But you notice it in a soft
in a
section.
slow movement.
And you notice every little thing that people say. Yeah, I remember I did some electronic music particularly when I was at UCSB.
Yeah.
And once at the Music Academy had a tape piece played, and it began kind of with a drum sound with electronic.
Yeah.
And these two women wanted to know what that noise was. What was that noise?
During the piece or
It
afterwards?
Just begun, yeah.
They asked afterwards, or they were asking?
They didn't really know it had begun, you know, because nobody could come out to direct
Oh, that's
it.
funny. Oh,
They
that's
just heard this sound.
right.
And then, I've had comments that were sort of uncalled for
Yeah.
because had a sort of wild cello piano piece played.
Yeah.
I don't know, some kind of a gathering. I think it was at someone's home. And the husband of the woman who was, it was their house. And I forget what it was he said. He obviously didn't like it. And I intimated that was me, anything you write has something of yourself in it.
Right.
So he was saying, oh, that's bad, or something. That's you? Oh no.
So I also asked her about her current projects, and this tells you a little bit what the direction of her style is going and what she's working on right now.
What are the pieces like that you've been composing recently, or the most recent?
Well, I've written some chamber music recently. And I think probably anything I write now has an eclectic feel to it. In other words, some of it can be very tonal sometimes, or modal.
Yeah.
Or it can be quite dissonant.
So a mixture of all the things you've tried.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're working on right now? Or planning to?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of things. I'm working on I'm supposed to write something for youth choir for a group in I think it's Ohio, and that. So I'll use a song. It'll be a song setting. I've done lots of song settings, lots of biblical settings, and then. So that's going to have a certain feel to it. It needs to appeal to young people.
Right.
And then I'm doing something, a trio for piano and trumpet and trombone.
Oh, okay.
And that is going to have a different sound to it, when you're using brass.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm going to have a little bit of, I've really not done any theatrics, in my music, because I really like absolute music. I'm not one to have people, sitting on a tire or something and playing. I know a lot of students have done that, and that's okay, but it's not something I see much point in. I like the music. I like the music, and when you start introducing other elements, they take
distracting.
But with this trio, I am going to have the trumpet and the trombone start in the wings, start outside.
Oh, okay.
Plays kind of a duet there, and then come to the center of the stage.
Well, that sounds really, really cool.
And a couple of places where they're going to play into the piano, put the pedal down.
Okay. Have you done that before with your?
No, I haven't done that, but many composers have. They're always doing things that I have maybe getting around to eventually. But just something a little bit different.
And I asked her for some advice about what she would say to listeners and performers, and this was one of the most interesting answers.
What do you hope that, if anything, what do you hope people would get out of playing your music or listening to your music, like if you could hope that they get something from it or take something away.
Oh, yeah, something positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you want them to feel the same way you did when you wrote it.
Yeah,
And
so
that's
get a glimpse of what
yeah,
you...
and that's a little subjective because people react differently to music. However, there are kinds of music, as I said before, that you can write that are audience friendly.
Right.
And you know that most people are probably going to like it. However, there are always people at the extreme end who prefer music a lot more adventurous or a lot more definitive or of a different style. But you hope that somebody will get something out of it. And I've had a lot of good comments about my music. People will say, I never liked contemporary music until I you know, and that's fine with me. I'm glad when they say that.
Yeah, that's
yeah, because I don't set about to displease people. Sometimes I don't really care, you know, what they think of the music. I just write something I want to write. But ordinarily, it would be nice if people had something that was good for them.
Right.
Because we know what music does for us. And so therefore, it would be nice to write music that does that for other people.
So, in conclusion, Diemer's music is contemporary, but it's accessible in that it's original and it's creative, but it doesn't push the boundaries so far that it makes it unappealing to people. And Diemer talked about composers that destroy all recognizable elements like rhythm or recognizable harmony, and she thinks that's why it's sometimes difficult to listen to contemporary music. It's not well known by many musicians, and we talked about this. It's still difficult to be a woman composer, difficult to get yourself out there, and she says she's not very good at PR for herself. But if you like her music, the solution is to try to listen to more of her recordings or try playing some of it yourself or assigning it to students. I'm definitely going to try assigning some to my students, because I know I played the toccata for them and they were just fascinated by it. All they wanted to do was play the insides of the piano at home. so this is where her recordings are available, and they're not widely available, but there are some out there. And this is where her sheet music is available. They have some on Sheet Music Plus, and you can order them directly from the publishers as well sometimes. So here is one more clip, and she does talk a little bit about the male versus female composer issue in this one.
Do you think people have paid more attention to male composers, or is that hard?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Of course they have.
Yeah. Like still now. Do you
Oh
think,
yeah. Yeah, you look. I was looking in the New Yorker today to see what's done in that area, and I think I did find one woman composer, and occasionally there will be another. But yeah, I'd say
it's still
90%.
still tough to get.
But that doesn't mean there aren't any women composers, and they do get things performed a lot. But
Yeah.
and I don't
They
know.
probably have to work harder to get it, to make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very interesting. That whole question is very interesting.
Well, thank you for talking to me. And, I think this is really interesting. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good questions, and your playing is wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed having the feedback from you. So yeah.
We'll stop it right there, and I'd like to play for you the toccata for piano. Well, first the first and second movements of the third sonata, and then the toccata for piano. So, Angel, is this screen interfering? I guess How do I turn off the picture? It's okay? Okay. I'm actually going to turn this off because it's bothering me so much. Okay, now. This is the toccata for piano. Right.
You said that you hadn't planned to ask her about her teaching pieces, but you ended up talking a lot about it. I'm just wondering if you got a sense that that was kind of where her real passion lies, or no?
Not necessarily. It's just a big thing for her that she said it really bothers her that so many piano pieces are written only in a limited area of the piano. But it was just something that I was particularly interested in that I didn't expect to talk a lot about with her.
Yeah, that's
So it was-
the only reason I knew her name, so I just wondered
Yeah.
how much of her heart was in that.
Well, I think a lot of it, I mean, she's definitely, teaching is a big part of her, has been a big part of her life, so I think it's also a big thing for her.
You know, I have a question. I first heard that toccata in like 1987 at a piano institute. Like,
Yeah.
where a bunch of kids, and I was one of those kids, and I, you know, in the audience was listening to it. And it was billed on the program as by Emma Lou Diemer, like a man.
Wow.
And it was 1987, and that was written in 1979. Is that right?
That's right.
And the kid who played it, who became a friend of mine, had no idea that, maybe thought it was Emma Lou Diemer. And the piano teachers, or the one at the time, I can't remember, Scott something, Emma Lou Diemer's toccata. And so I've always known it as a man's piece.
Until
Because yeah, exactly. I'd never seen it as Emma Lou Diemer's. And so I'm wondering actually, that's really intriguing to me, that maybe it was the publisher for the first couple editions made the toccata a man's piece.
Wow, that would be interesting to ask her.
Yeah, which is what I was wondering if she
Didn't mention.
went more on that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she did not mention that. I can email her and ask her.
Yeah, it was weird. And it was your paper that made me go, oh my gosh. I remember Emma Lou Diemer's toccata. It has to be the same thing. And it was the same thing.
I never knew that. Anybody else?